All right.
All right,
We are
recording.
recording again. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being available to be part of the conference today. You see that a lot of the speakers who are here, they are not only members of the community in general, but people that I gladly call friends. Nick is one of them. I really appreciate you making the time uh, to enlighten us on this madness of naming, changing, and portal solutions. So the show's yours, Nick. Go for it.
Per- Perfect. Thanks a lot, Victor. And that was a great session you did earlier. I actually I mean, I live here, but I've learned a lot. So hopefully you transferring that information to me, I can pass on to others. So I have a pretty packed hour here because I'm going to be doing some live coding. So I'm a little, to be honest, I'm a little nervous to make sure I have enough time. So I'm going to dive right in. I am going to be talking about alternate portal solutions. And originally this was called for the Common Data Service, but Microsoft Marketing kind of got their stickers and things out and renamed this to Dataverse. So we've updated the slide and now I have it proper here, alternate portal solutions for Microsoft Dataverse. And very quick thing about me, there's my QR code for LinkedIn, but we will be posting these. So if you do want to reach out to me, LinkedIn, definitely do that. But just make a little note to say, hey, I saw your session on Maple Power or something like that, just so I know where you're coming from. I'm a Microsoft MVP, a certified trainer. I currently live in Ottawa, Canada, which is the nation's capital. Follow me on Twitter. I have my blog. We talked about LinkedIn. I do a lot of training courses on 365.training as well, where there's a lot of free courses. We have paid courses as well. So if you're getting ramped up on the Power Platform, I invite you to check that out. And I also have my GitHub link there. And if I know Victor's going to be posting a lot of these sessions and stuff, but some of the code and stuff today, I'm going to try to put into GitHub repositories just so you guys have access to that. So, Canadian fun fact. I mean, Victor asked us all to make sure we put in a fun fact or put in a little bit of history around around this because we're all Canadian based. So, first question that people have sometimes asked is, have Canada and the United States ever gone to war? I mean, that we've gone to war together, but have we gone to war against each other? And yes, it's called the War of 1812. Now, Canada wasn't actually incorporated into a country until 1867. So technically, this was a war between Great Britain and the United States. But effectively, the actors who were involved in this conflict were the British soldiers based in Canada. And we could probably talk for 3 hours just about this war, the political implications, what led up to it, everything like that. But I'm just going to kind of hit to the high level stuff. Most Canadians, if you ask them about the War of 1812, they'll say Canada won. If you talk to Americans, people who lived in the United States, who know the history, they said the United States won. In reality, if you kind of look at the history, and I've watched documentaries on this, it was essentially a tie. We kind of came to a bit of a stalemate. There was certain battles won by each side. At the end of the day, none of the borders changed, nothing, in terms of expansion or anything like that. It really pretty much was status quo at the end of that war. A couple other things, if you heard that song Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton, and if you've not heard it, it's from the 50s, but it's something I'm sure you probably heard on a TV show or something before. You check it out on YouTube. And it was inspired by the last battle of the war. And an interesting fact, that battle was actually fought after the war officially ended. In those days, they didn't have Twitter, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have phone even. So the people in the American soldiers based in New Orleans and the British soldiers that were invading New Orleans didn't know the war was over. They were proceeding with their plans. So that Battle of New Orleans actually was fought after the war was officially over. So, we complain about the internet, but thank God we have it today so we can stop some of this craziness. And then the other thing, the last fun fact around that was part of these battles, the British actually burned the American presidential mansion. And they didn't burn it to the ground. They did a lot of damage. So it was repainted to white. So today, when you hear the term the White House was actually painted white after the British destroyed or did a lot of damage to it in part of the War of 1812. So anyways, hope you found that interesting today, the Americans and the Canadians, we do get along for the most part. We obviously have a few trade skirmishes and things like that, but for the most part, that was the only time we ever went to war with each other. And I hope we never do that again. All right, so like I said, we have a lot of stuff to cover today, and I'm going to be doing some live coding as opposed to just talking about things, which sometimes I do. So anyways, we're going to talk about why would we choose Power Apps portals, because sometimes it makes sense to use that, but really this is more about alternate solutions. So we're also going to talk why we would not choose Power Apps portals. We're going to take a very quick look at some of the alternate portal solutions that are out there. Some of these are third party, some of these are free. And then I'm going to focus in and use a technology called JAMStack. And if you've not heard about JAMStack before, I think you're going to find this pretty interesting. I was inspired by another MVP from Australia, John Liu, who wrote some videos about using JAMStack with SharePoint. So I've kind of taken a lot of what he did, but kind of applied that to what originally the Common Data Service, but now Dataverse. And then we're going to try to build a simple portal app in the time we have. And like I said, let's hope we're able to do it. So anyways, why Power Apps portals? And so all of you might have heard of Power Apps portals before, and I will talk a little bit about it because this is something that I've done a lot of blogs and videos and training, and I've implemented quite a few. Is they're very simple to provision. You go into the Maker portal, you click, boom, and about 20 to 30 minutes later, you have a fully working portal that you can begin to configure. And with the new Portal Studio that was put out about a year ago, you can begin to add pages, add elements to that to surface Dataverse data or Common Data Service data, like using functions called entity lists and entity forms. It has built-in security and authentication, doesn't take very much to configure that. And if you need to do more, you can extend that with JavaScript and Liquid and using the Portal WebAPI, which is in preview right now. And I've got a lot of blogs and videos on that. So does Victor, and so does other people in the community. So there's a lot of places where you can learn this particular information. So, but it comes down to why not Power Apps portals? And there is a slight learning curve. It is a little bit one of those things that's different from the rest of the Power Platform. It is Power Apps portals was a product from a company, a Canadian company called ADX Studio, who originally developed portals. Microsoft bought that IP and applied it in. Now it does work very well because it uses a lot of the elements from the Common Data Service and originally Microsoft 365. But there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. So even beyond the Portal Studio, a lot of that configuration has to be done in the metadata, and a lot of people get very kind of lost in that when they're first working with portals. I will admit, when I started working with Portal, like I've been working with CRM since version 1 years ago, but I started working with portals around 2012, 2013, and I was completely lost the first month. I had no idea how this stupid thing worked. So it took me a lot to figure it out. I think I've kind of figured it out now, and tools are a lot more accessible now, so hopefully it's a little bit easier, but it is still a little bit of a learning curve. It does have what I call lightweight CMS features, meaning if you're looking for that content management system, the portals has that, but it's not fully developed, much like a Drupal or a Sitefinity or a Sitecore and that kind of thing. So if that's what you're looking for, those features are not there. When you install it, if anybody's provisioned it, you know that it installs a lot of extra solutions on your particular environment. There's a lot of metadata there. So it adds a lot of, I don't want to call it baggage, but there's a lot of extra stuff that you have to babysit. The DevOps processes, they're a little bit tricky. It's definitely doable. And so check out some posts by Eugene Van Staden and a few others who have done some great blog posts and information about DevOps with portals, but it is still a complicated process. And then the big one is licensing. And for a lot of people, a lot of workloads, the licensing is just over the top for what you might want to use portals for. And that's probably the number one reason why people look away for other reasons not to use portals. And I'm not going to get into a big debate about the licensing today. I've said my piece many times to Microsoft, directly provided my feedback, but that's one of the big issues with portals. And at the end of the day, you really got to consider it might be completely overkill for what you're trying to do. And there's other solutions, and some of what I'll show you later on hopefully can align to that. And yeah, table lists and table forms. Yeah, it's probably coming, but that's what it is right now. So alternate portal solutions. So if you have to do something, because a lot of times people will say, hey, we need to collect some data. Should we set up a portal for this? You know what? You should consider Microsoft Forms or Customer Voice if you're using Dynamics 365. The data from that can be saved into the Dataverse. They are fairly easy to set up and manage. Another MVP, Megan Walker, who's based out of the UK, she's got a lot of blog posts on both Microsoft Forms, Forms Pro, and which Forms Pro evolved into Customer Voice. So check out her content on that. It's amazing to kind of learn and get your head wrapped around this. And this could be something that you could use instead of using a portal if you're collecting that data and bringing it in. And then the other thing too is Power Virtual Agents. If you need to surface information to your customer, you should consider maybe taking a look at Power Virtual Agents. Yes, there's licensing things with there, but it could be a better experience for your customer. These are chatbots. And if you start, I don't know, I only started playing with this a few months ago, and it's really cool. You can really build a very complicated chatbot very easily. And then it gives you an embed code, and you can embed this on your existing websites. So this is another way. If there's like knowledge article information or event information or information that you need to get to your customers, as opposed to surfacing a portal and giving them that, you could actually provide that information to them through a virtual agent. And with the great thing about the Power Platform is that there's a lot of other solutions out there, a lot of ISVs and third parties. So there's things like, they could be a better fit for your web platforms. If you're already using something like Sitefinity, if you're already using WordPress, I mean, there's connectors and integrations for those. And specifically, we look at something like the Alexa CRM. That's sort of a project product available for my friend George in Australia. He has a team behind that. And I've used it on a project and it works really well. It's a plugin you install. And within WordPress, you're able to use language called Twig, which is very similar to Liquid, and surface a lot of that information from your Dynamics 365 or your database or Dataverse, common data service, to your pages and interact with that. And another Canadian company, the Portal Connector from Pavlix, that's really a Sitefinity integration, but they've been around for quite a while. Steve and Ian are really good friends of mine as well, and they have a great solution that sits on top of Sitefinity and talks to Dynamics 365. It works really well. They have a lot of great traction. They're available in like more languages. It has a lot more features than Power Apps Portals. Their licensing structure is a little bit different as well. So that's another consideration when you're considering, portal solutions. And then the other thing is, other portal solutions is you can always build your own. You can, if you're a .NET developer and you built .NET websites or .NET, web applications, you have the ability to use the Power Platform SDK, the Dataverse web API, and it's definitely doable. And the company I work with, 365.training, David Yak, who's another MVP that I know a lot of you know, he built that site from scratch. He built it on top of .NET. Now, David's a brilliant .NET developer, but he built that all from the ground up. So they have things, but he's also had to do a lot of extra work around authentication, security, the user interface. But anytime we need a change to the site or need to reorganize things, Dave's able to go in, he can configure that. I could also go in and configure it and do pull requests that Dave can apply into the thing, and others who have worked with him on that. And then, of course, with the licensing and hosting, we all have it on Azure, so we can kind of monitor that and fine tune it depending. If we know there's a new course that's coming out and there could be a lot of traction, we might increase our resources doing that. So that's another option that's available to you when you're building Power Apps portals, or portals on Power Apps, or portals on the Power Platform. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, and this is what I'm going to focus on today in terms of technology, is JAMStack. Now, if you've never heard of JAMStack before, and believe me, I haven't heard of it till the spring, actually, and what the JAM stands for is JavaScript, API, and markup. And how it works, it's pretty brilliant, actually. It generates, the idea is you generate static web pages with all your content, and then you take that static web page and you post it to a website, or whether it's sitting on IIS or in Azure or wherever you want to post it. So then people will actually see whatever data you have or what you want to display on that static page. But the idea is you generate that. And then the other thing you can incorporate into that is your JavaScript. So if you do need to have some interaction and calling APIs, you use that JavaScript and you call the API. So there's actually no server-side code per se. You're just strictly calling APIs and you're displaying data. It's fast, it's secure, it's fairly low cost, it's easy to build, and it's scalable. So definitely check out what JAMStack is. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually use JAMStack and we're going to build a very simple portal. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a model-driven Power App that I created earlier, and this could be a Dynamics 365 app or anything like that. I'm going to use Power Automate, which was Microsoft Flow, and we're going to take that data from Dataverse and we're going to convert that to an HTML table. And then we're going to take that HTML table and we're going to send it to an Azure static website. And then hopefully we have enough time. I can also show you how we can update that data on that web page and send it back to Dataverse. So let's dive in right away. And I see great Victor and Eric are answering the questions. And so let's pop into this. You guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So I've created a model-driven app. I've called it Dynamic CRM, and I've done other talks on you don't need CRM, you need a Power App. So this is just extending that a little bit. I've added a section here for product management, and I've just added a very simple table of products here. So I see the different rows. I have the name of the product. I have the SKU. I have the cost. I have a quantity field here, and then I have this quantity reserved and a calculated field, what's available. So pretty simple model-driven app. So if I want to put this on a portal, then yeah, I could spin up a Power Apps portal. I can provision it. I can go and create a page, add an entity list and show this data. And then if I want my users to update it, I could add some entity forms where they can update their quantity reserved and kind of go back. And definitely doable, but there might be an easier way and I don't want to pay for the portal licensing. So first thing I'm going to do is where am I going to host this? Well, I'm going to host this on Azure, and not this one yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm going to post this on Azure, and if you've not played with Azure too much, I know some of you have. It's just cloud computing. There's like 1,000 different things we can do here. Things are constantly being added. But I'm going to do first is I'm going to add a storage account. So let's add a new storage. And I'm going to add, I've created a resource group already, Maple Power. So resource groups are really just containers of where you're storing your Azure assets. I'm just going to give this a name. Let's call this Maple Saturday. And we've done that. Where we're going to locate it, I'm going to put it in Canada Central. That's the data center closest to me. I'll just leave the performance as standard and replication. Let's just do locally redundant. I don't need it to be fancy, but of course, you know, the more you add, the more resources it will take, and there's costs involved with that. So let's review and create. Looks good. Let's create that. And what's happening is it's deploying that static site. And while it's doing that, it's going to be provisioning in the background. I'm going to actually get my demo script off to the side because I can't remember exactly all I'm doing all the time, so I don't want to miss any steps. So as we're doing this, let's go back to here. It's done. I'm going to go to that resource now. Cool. So I'm into this resource, and while the storage account is really kind of like online storage for the Power Platform. So what I'm going to do here, now that I've created this resource, I'm going to go, there's something called static website. And what static website allows us to do is to build a website tied to our storage account that we can post our pages. So I'm going to click on this, I'm going to enable it, and it's going to ask me for a couple things. So I'm just going to put in index.html. And then for a document path, I'm just going to do something like 404.html. So really, it's looking for those default files, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to hit save, and it's updating those websites. I do want to copy my primary endpoint here. Well, actually, first, let's just go to that. So I'm going to copy that, And I'm just going to go to that site directly. So it's generated that URL for me. And then right away, you'll notice that I get an error message that's not been configured, which makes sense because I haven't added anything to this yet. So let's, before we go into that, let's actually go and create some data that we're going to show on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here. And then the other thing I'm going to need to do is get my access keys, because I'm going to need it to tell Flow, and I'll make sure I copy that, to tell Flow what we're going to post to and where we're going to post it. So that's there. So we're going to come back to that in a bit. I'm going to go back to my Power Platform. I'm going to go into my Maker portal. So here we are. I'm in the right environment, and I'm going to go to my solutions. And let's just create a brand new solution. You should do all your assets and solutions, and that's a whole other talk. And I'm going to call that JAMStack Maple Saturday. Create my solution. I have a publisher already, my Ready XRM. We won't worry about version and stuff like that. I'm just going to create that solution. So that will show up in a second. So I'm going to go into my solution here. I got no components yet. That makes sense. It's a brand new solution, but I'm going to create a brand new flow. And now this is going to take me to Power Automate automatically, and it's going to create a flow that's going to live in my solution. I'll just expand that. A couple different ways we can trigger our flow. And if you've not used Power Automate before, I'll try to keep it fairly simple. It's an automation workflow tool, but I believe a lot of you have at least seen Flow or know what it is. I'm going to use what's still called the Common Data Service Connector, but I suspect that will be renamed soon. And whenever a record is created, updated, or deleted, I want that to trigger. So every time we update our product database, I'm going to want it to update the portal. So I'm going to show you how that's going to happen. Trigger condition, I'm going to choose create, update, or delete. For my entity, I'm going to find my product table that I created. It's called my Maple Power Products. And the scope, let's just leave this for organization. So every time that there's a new update to that table, it's going to trigger that flow. Now, of course, we're going to probably want to filter that or maybe do it on a schedule because we don't want to burn through our flows. But just for sake of the demo, we're going to leave this. And then my next step is we want to get those records from Dataverse. So I'm going to use the list records. And that's under the Common Data Service. And here's my list records component. And again, we want to find our Maple Power. Here we go, products. And I'm just going to move that here, just make sure I'm keeping an eye on the clock. And I think, we're good. And so I want to do that now. If anybody's used the list records lately, it's starting to complain if we don't have something in here. It will still work, but it's just getting annoying, to be quite honest. So I'm going to go in the filter query. I'm just going to do something very simple like state code equals 0, meaning just show me all the active ones. So by doing that, that's going to clear up this little list records thing it's complaining about. So I've got I've triggered, I want to grab all my records, all my products. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to create an HTML table with those records. So I'm going to choose the data operation of the action type, and I'm going to go create HTML table. And where am I doing that from? Now I'm going to pull that from the value of that list of items from that list records. And as soon as I do that, it is going to, actually, no, that's right. So it's going to pull those list records. It's going to grab the value. And for my columns, I'm going to put in custom, and I want to, show different things. So I want to show my product name, and we can't put spaces in here. It's a little weird, but that's just the way it is. So from here, I want to put in the product name. Let's do the SKU. Let's add my SKU here. So I'm basically adding my fields that I'm getting from that list record. It's going to go into this HTML table. So cost, again, we have two values for multi-currency. I'll just do that. And then finally, I'm going to do the quantity available. Yeah, quantity available. So let's just do that. So I've created my HTML table. And the next thing I want to do is create a web page that we're going to put into that Azure static site that we created earlier. I had a new step here, and it is going to be a compose. I'm going to use the compose statement here. And so for my inputs, I basically just want to grab the output of that HTML. Actually, I want to do a little bit more than that because we want to make this look a little bit cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start doing some coding here. I'm going to put in a very simple HTML table. So if anybody who's not done HTML before, it's pretty simple. There's some good sites. I like going to W3 Schools. I know that there's some other ones as well. But basically, I'm just doing a very, very simple HTML page. So the body, I like to always do my closing stuff. And let's just put in a big heading, Maple Saturday. And finally, I'm going to put in the output. That's the HTML table. So I'm going to pop that in here. So we've now created our web page, and I'm just going to, let's just save, let's just call this create page is the name of my flow. I'm going to save that, but still we haven't got anywhere yet. We've just got that HTML page here. So let's go to the next step, saving. Inside saved, you take a drink, coffee. And now let's get it into Azure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new step here, and I'm going to type in Azure Blob. So Azure Blob Storage is my action. And this is the great thing about Flow. If you've not used it, you can link to, like, there's over 300 different connectors, both within Microsoft and outside of Microsoft. It's just amazing. So what I want to do here is go to the create blob, because I'm going to create a blob storage, meaning I'm going to create an actual attribute. So here, in terms of my folder path, now what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to go in, here's my connection references. I'm going to add that new connection reference. So the connection name, I'm just going to call it Maple Saturday. I can call this whatever I want. And then the storage account name, remember when we created our static site and our storage account, we copied that name. So we're going to do that. I'm going to go and grab that. It was Maple Saturday. And our access key was here. So I've got that in my clipboard. So I've added that. So I'm going to create this connection. So now that's creating that connection to my Azure. So don't worry about that. And now that it's here, I can specify the path. Now, one thing I didn't show you, and I should have, when you specify your Azure Blob Storage to be a static site, it's going to create a folder called $web. So I'm going to choose that is going to be where I'm going to store the files. So that index.html, that 404 HTML, that would be created in that folder. The blob name, I can call that whatever I want, but I'm going to call that, I'm going to be the default name that comes up, which is index.html. So remember, we created that as sort of the index file. So that's going to be the web page that gets loaded automatically. And in my blob content, I want to show the output from this compose here. So I'm just going to choose that, but I'm going to rename this because I'm just going to get lost pretty quickly. And I'm just going to call this create web page. So pretty simple, 5-step trigger plus 4 steps in our Power Automate. And then we're going to save this. So we're going to saving our flow, and it's saved. And now I want to hit the test. I'm going to hit the test. I'll perform that trigger action. So I'm just going to hit save and test here. And now that flow is going to be basically waiting for my trigger so we can follow it through. I'm going to go back to my products table here, and let's pick up flux capacitor record, and let's update the quantity in the warehouse to 87. So that, like I said, the trigger is triggered on any updates of the data. I'm going to hit save, and we'll just save and close that. So we're back to our list. We've updated that. If I now go back to my flow, and this is where it gets nervous doing live demos. We want to make sure things works. Sometimes it takes a minute. Oh yeah, flow ran successfully. Tick, 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 tick. That's good. So now let's go back to our page that we created in our Azure static site. So that was here. And this, we had that, remember we had that error message. So let's just refresh that. Ooh, I get HTML code here. So I forgot to do something. So let's go back, and it's something I always forget to do. So let's go back here and edit our flow. Of course, development, we have that loop. We're constantly fixing stuff. So let's go here when we create the blob. If we click on advanced options, we need to specify the content type. So our content type needs to be text. So done that. So if you notice I'm doing something blatantly wrong, you know, you can always call that out too. But sometimes there's a reason for my madness. So anyways, we've done that. Let's hit test again, and let's just use our test data so we don't have to go back to our app and keep triggering it. This is another thing I love about Flow, is if you've worked with classic workflows in the past, you know you always have to go back to your app and update data. Well, here I can keep testing using past runs. So this ran successfully. It was very fast. I'm going to go back to here and let's refresh. And there we go. Take a look. We've, in probably like 10, 15 minutes, I'm able to, with static sites, with Flow, I was able to pull data from Dataverse and display this on a publicly facing web page. Now, if you guys go here, you'd be able to see this as well. So this is now publicly available. Now, I know that there's a lot of questions in terms of security and all this other stuff. And first thing I look at is like, it looks cool, but it looks a little bit ugly. So how can we begin to clean this up? Now, I'm not a designer by no means. I like to call myself, if anything, I call myself a citizen designer. And I'm going to go into the web page here, and let's add some CSS. Now, I will admit I'm not a CSS expert by no means, and I'm not going to start typing in CSS here, because we would burn through all our time. So what I'm going to do here is between my before the body here, I'm going to plug in, just going to copy in a header, and I'm going to put in some styling for the table. So I've done that. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to hit test. Let's run our test data again. So it's saving that flow, it's running it. It's gone through the steps. You see how fast it is? It's really cool. And let's go back to our page here. Let's do a refresh. All right, cool. This looks a lot cleaner. So, you know, again, you can begin to apply your own styles to this to really make it look how you really want it to look. So this is cool. But then you're probably wondering, okay, that's great. I can display data, but now, and then it gets updated every time someone updates the quantity. This is going to generate a whole new page. So if I go back into my app here, and let's say I'm doing an inventory count, and there's a thingamajigger, that's not 23, it's now 50 actually, and I hit save and close, that's going to trigger my flow. My flow is going to generate a brand new web page, and it's going to post that web page. So effectively, that's the core of how JAMStack works. It's basically, it's markup, it's using the APIs, but it's really just creating that static site and posting it there. And of course, this is asynchronous, so it's not like, you know, the user is going to see this in real time. There is going to be, because Flow is an asynchronous process, it probably will take a few seconds, but you saw how quick it was. So that's just sort of one way to get information out to somebody. Oh yeah, question about, other than Azure Storage Explorer, do you have any recommended tools for reviewing editing static sites? Yeah, I don't actually. It's just I just sort of picked that at random as to store stuff. So if anybody has some good resources on Azure static sites and the Storage Explorer for Phil, put those in the chat window too. Just again, they're all sharing here. This is a collaborative effort. So I'm going to go in. So the next thing we want to do is, hey, how about we want to have our users enter in some data? So what I could do is, okay, how can I change my flow to actually get data in? So the thing I could think of is, well, in my HTML table, how about I add, a request, so I can actually put in a request here. And then I'm tempted to start injecting my own HTML because there's no actual thing I can put in here to collect data. So I would be tempted to put in something like a very simple HTML. So I just do an input type. Again, not wanting me to put in text here. So I'm just going to, so I could put in something, that HTML here, but what that's going to do is just going to display that HTML very similar to how it happened when I first actually ran this. So what I'm going to do is just a little trick. I'm going to put in something called placeholder here. So I have placeholder sitting in my request. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a compose statement. Compose data operation. And I'm going to call this basically input request. And then here I'm going to inject that piece of HTML that I want. And I'm going to use the input type equals, and we're going to put in a quantity. So we want that to be number. And then I'm just going to put as the name of whatever this is. I'm going to use an array because remember, we have a whole list of things here. So I'm going to put in an array here. And again, this is standard HTML stuff. I'm not going to dive into HTML today, but this is basically saying, hey, I want the users to type in something on my HTML page. So I've added that. Now, how are we going to get this into our table? We have this placeholder here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a replace. And after I've created my web page, I'm going to add an action. And again, I'm going to use the compose. And I'm going to basically, I'm going to call that replace with entry or request. And in my inputs here, this is where I'm going to dive into using a function. So I'm going to go in expressions. I hate expressions. I always get doesn't work right. So let's try. Let's hope this works. I'm going to hit replace. And what I want to do is replace the output from here. So my create web page. So I'm going to go into dynamic content. And this is what I don't like. It kind of overrides this. So I'm going to choose that output. So I want to replace the text in here because remember, all that's doing is generating HTML. I want it to replace placeholder. And I want to make sure that's right. So every time it sees placeholder, I want it to replace with the output from my input request. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click OK. And so I have this expression here. I can take a look at that. And let's see if I can slide that over, placeholder. So I have my expression in here. It's going to replace all that. So that's cool. It actually worked. I didn't get that message. So, and then of course, what I have to do is in my create blob, I want to now put the output from that replace request. So I'm going to choose that output. And let's just save this. Cool. It saved it. And let's run another test. And now let's going to see what's going to happen. So I've run this, it's running, it's done that. Let's go back to our page here. And I'm going to refresh this. And now we have the ability that we can start entering our data here. That's great, but that's still not getting back into Dataverse. I want these requests to update this information directly in Dataverse. So how would I go about doing that? So the next thing, a couple things we need to add here is we're also going to want to capture the GUID because we're going to know what record we're going to show. So this is where it's going to get a little bumpy. So Hang on, everyone. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into my HTML table, and I'm just going to create a column here called GUID. And I could easily just go in and put the GUID of the product. So let me find that. So this is the unique identifier. So I've added that here, but that GUID is going to look, first off, it's going to look really ugly. Second of all, I still have to capture that in an array or something so I could use it a little bit later in my JavaScript. So I'm going to create a tag here the same way I did before, but I want to create one before and after. So actually I'll do this. I'm going to go call this before. I'm going to put in my GUID, do that again. And then I'm going to choose after. So I have that in here, and now I want to replace this with proper HTML, but also incorporating that GUID. So that's why I've kind of incorporated all this. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compose what the want to show. So data operation, let's use compose, and I'm going to rename this to before. And what I want to do is put in okay, so I have to type that in. I again want to choose an input type. Again, HTML, but this time instead of number or text, I'm going to use hidden. I don't want to show that GUID, but it needs to be there in the back. So I'm going to choose hidden, and then the name I'm going to equal, and now I'm going to actually call this the GUID array for lack of better wording. And whoops. And the value is going to equal, and that's the start, that's the before part. And let's do the after part. So add action, another compose. And so my after part, let's rename that. And this I think is probably the most, well, I'd say most complicated, but it's probably the most tedious for watching. Anyway, so I've added that before and after. So now, after I've replaced with my request, what I need to do is do my replace before and after. So I'm going to do that, add action. Again, another compose. So this flow is made up of a lot of compose statements. Let's do this. Let's rename update before. And here, I want to choose, again, under my expression, I want to replace, and I want to take, when replace, what am I going to replace? I'm going to replace the output of that replaced with request. So again, going to my dynamic output, and the next thing I'm going to put is replacing the before, and I'm going to replace this with the output from the before. So effectively what I'm doing is I'm building that HTML, that front end, but I'm kind of incorporating that into the table because we can't edit the table directly. And let's actually add the next one, another compose. And I'm going to rename this to update after. And again, I'm going to choose an expression and replace. And again, I'm going to choose the output from my update before because we're continually modifying. So I'm going to go to there. So I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to replace my after placeholder. And I'm going to replace that now with the after function or the compose I did earlier. So I've done that. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to do here is in my outputs, I want the output of the update after because we've continually updated it. So update after outputs here, text HTML, save. And I know that was a lot of work. And then the other thing I want to do too is while we're working on this is let's add some more JavaScript or actually add some JavaScript to our web page that we're creating. So to go in to do that, between the after the output, what we're going to do is we want to add a button. So I'm going to add a button here, and let me just find my code. And again, it's HTML. So let's actually pluck in an HTML button. So I have my button type. It's called a button, and on click, I'm going to run a JavaScript function called reserve. And then I have my button here. So let's actually, we're going to plump in some JavaScript, and I know I'm just running a little bit short on time. So let's just, we're going to kind of dive into, hold on a second here. I have the full JavaScript. Let's copy that, edit, select all. And actually, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do JAMStack 1. Where's open with, anyways, Visual Studio Code. There we go. All right, JAMStack 1. So I'm not going to go into the whole JavaScript and stuff, but I know if any of you have used JavaScript, probably fairly simple code here. So I'm just going to copy that from Visual Studio Code. Reason why I'm doing it in there, because to actually do code editing directly in Power Automate is going to be extremely painful. So I'm going to plunk that here. And then the other thing I'm going to do is, just give me 2 seconds here. I want to add a placeholder because I'm going to show some information. So here, after the button, I'm going to just put a little paragraph here with an ID because I'm going to access that. So what I'm going to do is with this particular JavaScript, let's just save that. Let's just take a quick look at the JavaScript, and I'm going to tell you what it does, because part of JAMStack is, can I increase the size of this? Here we go. All right. So first off, JavaScript, calling that function reserve. So remember, we called the button, and the button we clicked, the button we're going to create, we want to reserve those values. So what we're going to do is we're going to start building JSON. So it's JSON. JSON notation is a data format. And what it basically is key value pairs. So there's a reason why we want to capture that. So I have some JavaScript here, and I'm going to build out that JSON string with the updates and the GUIDs that are in my table. So I'm going to loop through that, build out that JSON string, and then I'm going to dump that out. So I'm going to need that for my next step. So we've got that added in here. I've added that code into my flow. So let's go and run the flow and save and test. So what that's now doing, again, same thing, we're generating our page. If I go back now to, whoops, back to my page here, and let's just do a refresh. Let's hope this works. Okay, I got a syntax error here. It's showing the thing, so I screwed up somewhere. But you do notice I've added my button is now showing up on here. So let's just see if this actually works. If it doesn't, oh, it did. Okay. So it still worked, but technically this is all supposed to be hidden. So I know there's probably something a little off here. But what we'll see here is this is that JSON string that we created. And again, don't worry about this. We're not going to show our users, but I am going to need it for my next step. So I'm going to actually copy this particular string, because now part of JAMStack is using JavaScript to call web API or APIs. So you're going to wonder, oh, API sounds complicated. How do I do that? Once again, Power Automate to the rescue. So I've created this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. I'm going to actually close this, and I'm going to create a new flow in my solution. And let's add a new flow. And this time I'm going to use the HTTP connector. Nope, not that one. Sorry. I'm going to create a new flow. Actually, no. New flow because I want it to be within the context. All right. Request. Here it is. And I want an HTTP request to receive. So we're beginning to create our new endpoint. We don't need to be a developer. You just need to use know how to use Flow. We don't know that post URL yet, but it's going to be requesting JSON. Where do we have JSON? We were able to generate that from our JAMStack page. So I'm going to use this use sample payload. I'm going to paste in my JSON. It's done. And by pasting in that example, it's created that schema. So now that I know that schema, the next thing I can do is I'm going to add a step, common data service again, and now I'm going to update records. So update a record. What entity do I want to update? I want to update my products records. So here we go. Where are we? MP products, and I am keeping an eye on the time. So the GUID, remember we're passing that record ID. That was something that we hid on the form. So I'm going to pass that. And now as soon as I did that, it's recognizing that it's getting more than one record. So what Power Automate does automatically, it creates this apply to each saying, hey, we're updating more than one record. We're updating a bunch. So let's go through that loop. I'm going to go in here and in the product name, I don't want to update the product name, but I'm going to update this quantity reserved field. And now I know this is not exactly how it probably should work, but and then I'm going to fill in that that reserve value in here because that's a number that's going in here. So that's all good. So as soon as I save this flow, it's going to, I want to call that update products. I'm going to save this and that's up and working. Now I've done this. Now it's created this post URL here. So I'm able to capture that. And then with that post URL, and I don't have time to show that, I would actually test if I'm developing this, and this when I was putting this together, I tested this out, is I used something called Postman. So with Postman, I'll be able to go in and put in that that URL, and then also put in that JSON string and actually test this out to make sure it works. But we actually want to do this from our page. So what I'm going to do is let's actually jump ahead and take a look at some other JavaScript here, just because I'm down to 5 minutes. And that's what I was a little concerned with. I'd be a little short on time, but all good. So let's look at the final script. So this is the final script that I would put in. Same thing, we're building our JSON. But here I'm putting in the, I'm creating a new XML HTTP request. And that's in JavaScript, we want to call an API. Here's the URL. This is the URL that got created from Flow. So I have that. And then it's going to open that post. It's going to send the request header. It's going to send all that JSON, send it out. And then it's just going to update and say, hey, request has been sent. So that was going to be the sort of the next thing. And as opposed to me generating all this, what I'm going to do instead for sake of time is I'm going to go here to my storage accounts. And I'm going to go into this one. That was the one I created yesterday. And let's actually open static website. So very much like a cooking show, one I created earlier. And I'm going to go to that site instead. So this is sort of my finished version of this. Let's expand the size of this a little bit. And I put in the reserve. So we say here we have 40, 82, 43. So let's just put reserve of 3 each. And I'm going to hit that reserve. And so it's the request sent. What's it's actually doing, it calling that flow on the other side, which is updating. It's going to update my Dataverse, update that data with a reserve. So let's take a look at my Power app. which is here. And remember, so here it's 5, but remember we updated it with 3, hit refresh. Boom, it's updated with 3. So I was able to use that static page that I generated and update it. Now, of course, it's going to create 6 more pages and send those off. So if I go back again to my page here, whoops, too many tabs. That's normal. If I just refresh this now, again, my calculations are a bit up, but notice my quantity changed here because that page got regenerated and posted up to Azure Static Sites. The last thing that I did want to point out to, if you noticed before, is if I just run this one more time, I hit that reserve, the request got sent, but also in that flow, if I had time, I could have showed you with the request, I also could send a response, and that response is now showing as updated as well. So that's just part of the HTTP connector within Flow. So definitely check that out as well. I've run out of time. Really apologize for that. But you know what? I think I've got through all the concepts I wanted to. There was just a couple extra little things that I did show you. I do want to put out a thank you definitely for John Liu. Here's his website. Check it out. He's done some videos on this as well. And that was the inspiration for JAMStack and about sharing and learning stuff. And also for Victor for organizing this event. Hopefully next time we do this next year, we're going to do this in person, right, Victor? We're all going to gather somewhere, maybe Banff.
That's
Also,
right. We're gonna be
Microsoft.
doing the talks and the post conference at Lake Louise.
Perfect. And thanks for Microsoft for making this stuff cool. And also for the community. You guys are awesome. The feedback that I get, the questions that you send, everybody's learning, everybody's sharing. I think this is one of the best communities out there, to be honest, the Power Platform around all that stuff. It's way cooler than some of those other communities that are out there. And finally, from that is fill out the survey, win like cool swag like this shirt that Victor and I and a few others are wearing today. I think there's some other prizes as well. It's pretty cool. There's nice and warm for the cold weather. And thank you so much. Hopefully, if there are questions, definitely get back to me. I know there's some other questions that are going to spin from this around API limits and licensing and other things from that. Security is a big one. Security on the HTTP request and response. I might do a part 2 of this session where we take a look at the API management because there's ways we can mitigate that. But yeah, and I think Eric lost his car. So I think if anybody notices a missing car with Quebec plates, Eric is looking for it. And thanks a lot, everybody.
You forgot a detail. It's a missing Ferrari.
There we go.
Well, let me stop the recording here. Just makes it easier for me to when I'm editing later, Eric.
Great.